recorded.
This is Liz Haney, and today we're going to present a Homekeeper training on getting into an application process that works for everyone. So we'll be talking about some of the most basic steps in Homekeeper to get applicant information and income information into Homekeeper. And then we'll also be talking about ways you can master that process and take it further. And so for the folks who have just called in, you go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat box. And also, if you want to take a look at these polls I have down here, just to kind of get a temperature read of people in the room, that'll let us know whether you're folks who've been using Homekeeper for a while, and also if you're currently tracking applicants or you're waiting for new developments to come through or something like that. Michael, are you on one of these 415 numbers?
No, I'm not. I'm Michael T.
Okay. I'm just linking up your phone numbers just that way if we get some feedback.
Yeah, sure. The 1009 is me. I think
okay,
you
great.
just sent it, right? Yeah.
Great. And so just a tip, if you do have like a client come in or anything like that, you can hit *6 and that will mute you. It looks like I'm having some feedback, but if the recording just started, today we're going to be talking about getting to an application process that works for everyone in Homekeeper. And so I'm just having people fill out these polls down at the bottom to get a feel of where you are in this process. But then we can move on a little bit. And so I'll move these polls. But our agenda for this call today is the first thing we'll talk about is what is the essential information that you need in order to enter applicants into Homekeeper. The second thing we'll do is I'll actually do a live demo. So if you're wondering how to get that information in by hand, we'll talk about that. The third thing we'll talk about is how you can take those basics that already exist in Homekeeper and extend them further because Salesforce is really customizable. And then the fourth thing is to sort of brainstorm together how, now that you're using Homekeeper, you have this data at your fingertips, and who are the people you can start talking to about that data, whether it's your staff, whether it's advocating at your city or your state level, and how you can also direct resources by looking at the data that you're getting from your applicants. So the first thing is, what is all this information that you usually need to track? And so here is my list. And so you can see probably the most important is knowing who the applicant and the co-applicant are. And so that's in how we talk about it in Homekeeper. There's actually fields called applicant and co-applicant. And for the main people who are applying to your program, you're going to need their contact information on top of their demographic information. So you'll need to follow up by email, phone call, mail them different things. And they also probably need to know things about their demographics. Funders usually want to know about race, ethnicity, and sometimes they also have additional metrics that they want to know about female head of household, seniors, veterans, things like that. When you get a little further into knowing who's part of a household that's applying to your program, they're going to want to know who are the other people and, you know, do they exist? And is it dependents or are they other adults? And then on top of that, the application will have different information. So it's going to ask, you're going to get their mailing address. You might ask about their condition, where they're living, or those funder demographics that we talked about just a second ago. Another piece of information that I think not all Homekeeper realize about is application progress. So on top of kind of these things that are static and attached to a family, what is their race, what is their ethnicity, what is their income, you want to track their interaction with your program. So what day did they turn in their application? What day did they first call? So that's what I mean when I talk about the application progress is a piece of information you'll want to track. And then the fifth is the income sources that this family has, which you may collect just at one point in time. You may collect at multiple points in time. But eventually you will probably need to certify their eligibility income for your program and for your funders. And so if you think I missed anything in that kind of inventory, feel free to type it in the chat box and we can talk about it. But now we'll talk about our sample family. So I have this 5-person family that has all kinds of diversity in ages, and this is the family that I'll be entering in for my demo. And so you can see here that some of that information that I was just talking about, it comes in at different points of time and on different pieces of paper and through different actions. So some information is going to be straight off on application. The date of home buyer ed is actually like a physical presence at a meeting that needs to be recorded. You can see I have their application address, and you might need a proof of residency if you have residency-based eligibility criteria. And then you can see these are my fake pay stubs for the 2 jobs in this family. And so just to get this clear in folks' mind, I'll talk about this is my sample process. And so every program has, so I'm going to hide the polls because Michael asked me to. And so what I was saying is this is a sample process that I'm going to demo, and yours might differ. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a couple minutes. But this sample process is going to be as if my family is receiving a paper application, and that's got some of this information on it. And then they come to an orientation, and they attend homebuyer education somewhere else, not at my program. And then in this sample program, after they've attended homebuyer ed, we verify their income and we certify it, and then the family goes on a wait list. But then when the family actually qualifies for a particular home, we re-verify their income at the time of purchase. And so that's just the sample process that I'm going to show you today. And yours might vary. And so this is what this slide is about too. So HomeKeeper is customizable. You can get it to match your process, and you should have it match your process. That's the only way you're going to be able to use HomeKeeper to its best potential. Great. And so right now I am going to pause this. I'm going to share my screen. So can someone just let me know that you can see my screen? You should see a service file. Great. And so the first thing that you need to do when you are entering in an applicant family is you need to create a service file. So to do that, there's a couple places where you can go. You can click Create New and go to Service File, or you can click on the Services tab and then click New. For most programs, you're going to choose a homeownership record type. That's the most basic, and that's what HomeKeeper comes with. Then we'll have to give this service file a name, and usually most programs have a naming convention. And so maybe we'll enter in an initial contact date. They came in 11/11/2013. We'll save that. Oops. And they're applying to the CLT program. And so those are just a couple basic fields to get this service file started, but the major steps that we'll do to get the applicant and co-applicant information in is to use the Enter Applicants link. And so that should be under Custom Links, or you can also click in the Homeownership Overview on Applicant and Co-applicant Entered. And so on this page, I'm going to enter in Nicholas and Floria's information. And I'm going to skip these contact ones because I don't have any fake email addresses for them. I'm going to leave this checkbox checked because that's going to actually copy the address I just typed in. It's going to copy it to their applicant address on the service file. And we'll talk about why that's important a little bit later. in terms of reporting and seeing where your clients are coming from. And then I'll put in his birth date. And now I'll add his wife. And we'll say she's born 3 years later. And so what's going to happen when I hit save for this service file is that the information that's here on the left is going to create a contact record. So contact records live on this tab up here, and you're going to have contacts for your bank, for your loan officers. You might have them for contractors. You might have them for appraisers. Basically, anyone who you would need to call, Salesforce can create a contact for them and hold that information. The information on the right is going to go to an application household member record. And you'll see in a second, we're going to create application household members for every member of this family, including for the applicant and co-applicant. And when we talk about household size in HomeKeeper, HomeKeeper counts up the number of application household members. And that's how it knows how to calculate how many people are in it and what percentage of AMI it should calculate, which we'll also get to in a second. And so the application household member record collects demographic information that you probably don't need about your loan officer. Birth date, gender, race, ethnicity. And the fields on the application household member record level, those are up to you. They're not actually mostly national roll-up fields. Just birth date is important to keep track of so we can tell how old, how many seniors and how many children are part of the household. But if you don't want to track the race of every single person in the household, you don't need to. And so then when I hit save on this enter applicants link, you'll see that a couple different things changed. You can see that Nicholas and Floria both are in the applicant and co-applicant fields. And they've also been created as application household members. So you can see this is where that demographic information exists. And they're both full-time household members, and it'll also assign them an application role. So now that we've gotten those two, we can actually add in their children. So children don't need to have a contact record. If you wanted to have a contact record for them, you could create one. And do that right there. But for this demo, we're not going to do that. And so this will be their little baby. And so their kids are going to be dependents. And so you can see there's some other demographic fields that weren't on the little preview we just saw before. So if you do want to indicate someone's a part-time household member, that's available to you. As well as, you know, if someone's a part-time household member and you don't actually count them when you're certifying their income, you can uncheck this. And so another quick tip, if you are entering in application household members, and a lot of the information is similar, so if they, presumably a lot of members of the same family are going to have the same race and ethnicity, so you can use this clone button, and that's going to carry over a lot of the information there before, and now I don't have to enter it in. And so I just have a couple more family members, and then we'll be good to keep going. And then now we'll add grandma. And so you can see there should only be one primary applicant and one co-applicant, but you can have as many dependents and other types of family members that you want. And so now, when you're on an application household member, you can click on Service File, and that will actually navigate you back to the service file. And so now that we've done that, we can enter in some of the demographic information that would be on the paper application. And so on that paper application, it probably will have something about whether they're a first-time home buyer. Sorry, if somebody has a beep, I don't think that's me. If you could mute yourself, that'd be great. And so I just saw that Erica had a question in the chat box. Sorry, are you guys getting a beep feedback too?
Yes.
Hold on one second. I'm going to see if I can figure out who that beep is.
Can you just mute everybody?
I believe it's a 206 number, I think.
Is it us?
If we hear it again, I'll try to mute it. Okay. Can you guys still hear me? Okay, thanks everybody. This is why you need to have a coworker on your webinars always. So let me see. It is this 567 number. Okay, I think I may have gotten it now. So we should be able to go on. And so what I saw is that, Erica, you guys had a question. So this homeownership overview, this is something that came out in the last release of HomeKeeper. And we actually created it so that you could easily enter in an applicant and a co-applicant. So if you have a question about if you don't have the homeownership overview, open a ticket and we can talk about getting that on your layout. Because sometimes it just falls through the cracks with release notes. And so just to get back on track for the demo, so you might have all of these fields on your application, but I'm just going to do a couple for our purposes. So great. You might pull some of that information off of their paper application, and you might also get this in an interview. And so another note about this, we'll talk about customizing your HomeKeeper in a little bit, but if some of these fields don't have any applicability to you, take them off the layout as they're not national roll-up fields. You can see what the national roll-up fields are by clicking Review National Roll-Up Data. But if, for example, you don't care the last date of that bankruptcy discharge or whether they work in the country, you can actually edit the layout and be able to take those fields off. You might need to check with your lead Salesforce person if you're in a larger organization with more customization, but just know that you don't have to keep every field that's on the layout. And so let's say I transcribe all that information. There's probably also income information on their application. So I'm going to add two income sources, one for the husband and one for the wife. And he's in manufacturing. And you can actually connect the wage earner for this field, and so you can keep track of who earned the wages. And you can make eligibility adjustments if that's something that's important to your program, and talk about income calculations, as well as note how you verified their income. And so I'll hit clone, and now I'm going to enter his wife's information. And I mixed up the numbers on these. And so she does part-time public service. And so using these fields can be really important for telling the story of who your buyers and who your applicants are and where their income came from. So, but you can use more or less. Not all HomeKeeper users put in the business contact or the business name, and not all HomeKeeper users use these verification fields for verifying income. And then so I'm going to update their status and say that they submitted their application. And so you can start to fill out this application workflow. You might, yours might look different, which is good. And you can use these fields to keep track of where people are in the application process. And so if you're managing multiple applicants at the same time, one tip I would have for you is, so let's say we have 5 different applicants and they all attend the same orientation, or they all are turning in the same applicants at the same time. One tip that will help you manage your data in a faster way is if you use inline editing and list views to keep track of this different stuff. So if you have 3 different folders on your desk and you've checked the eligibility for the Voda family, the Dunkley family, and the Sallow family, you can mark all of them at one time right in Salesforce. Or if your accounting person on your team gives you a list of who's paid their commitment fee, you can check off multiple people when you get that information all at the same time. And so if you have a question about that, I'll provide a link for the slides to this training, and you can learn how to do inline editing. So it's pretty cool. You might say, all of these people want to be called at 6 a.m., which is probably not true, but the beauty of this is that all of those records all got updated at the same time. And you can add and remove the fields that are relevant for you. So it might be homebuyer ed completed, it might be application fee submitted, or application complete. And you can set the criteria to control who shows up. And so you can see our Terhar family is down here. And I'm glad you like list views all over. Great. And so getting back to this family, you can see down here that their income is showing up here. And I actually am going to link an AMI record. If you don't know what AMI records are, AMI records you probably should set up before you start doing anything in HomeKeeper, because there's only a few of them, and you'll need to reference them a lot. So just like a lot of things in HomeKeeper, you can create AMI records by going to the AMI tab and clicking the New button. Mine are already created, so I'm not going to go through how to do that right now. But if you have any questions about that, the instructions are going to be in the training article, which is on the support forums. And so I'm going to look up their AMI record and look. I don't see the one I'm looking for. Well, let's just say they applied in 2013. And when you add the AMI record, HomeKeeper is actually going to calculate what their percentage of median income is. And so you can see here they're at 70.7%. And that's a data point you can use to tell your story, or to see if the percent of AMI is something that you require for your program. You might use that field as well. But if you have HUD funding or some others' funding, and they use income brackets, so income ranges for how they want to finance you, you'll want to check with your actual funder limit. This percentage is literally what percent of 100%, what percent of the 100% value is this family. And so for this family, I'm going to look for a family of 6 in Fitchburg, making $56,900. It looks like they're going to fall in between. They're going to be in the low income bracket, so the 50 to 80 bracket. So I check out this chart. I can see that they are under 71 or under 76, but above 50. So that means I'm going to put them into this income category, so the low income category. And I've talked to a couple HomeKeeper users who actually have other funders who have their own charts and their own limits. And so if that is the case, you can create another field to keep track of that. And so that's how income works. And so what I'll do now, so in my process, we certify people, my sample process, we certify people before they go on the wait list. So we're going to certify their income, and then we'll put them on the waiting list. And so in my program, that just means we use this date field. And so hypothetically, this family does a lot of hard work. They, accomplish all the other things that we want them to do. And eventually, the time that they purchase rolls around, and they're actually connected to purchasing a property. And so in my program, that's the point in time that my funders really care about. So I'll connect them to their property and do all the other wonderful things that are associated with entering a purchase. But in terms of the income and eligibility information, this is when I'm actually going to, so if their income had changed, I would update their income sources. I'm not going to do that right now because this hypothetical family's income stayed exactly the same. But I'm going to look up the new AMI since they're purchasing in 2015. And so you can see a little bit later that same amount of money is a lower percent of AMI. Maybe this brings them into a different income category. So I'll update those since I might need to do reporting to my funders with that. And now I'm going to recertify because these are the values that I want to report on to my funders. And so defining when you click this Certify Income button is totally up to you. It just depends when you want to officially say this is the amount of annual income that this buyer earned. Some HomeKeeper users do this differently. So the key is when do you want to finalize this certified annual income value? And does anyone have any questions about what I just demoed before I go back to the PowerPoint? All right, well, I can jump back into it if anyone does have questions. Oh, good question, Lindsay. So the weird thing, Lindsay, about the income categories is that they don't actually line up perfectly with the income categories don't exactly line up with the percentages. HUD does this really crazy process where they'll adjust the income categories based on what the median income is. And so for some people, actually an 82% value will show in the category that's labeled as having a limit of 80. So it's really important that if you get HUD money and they want you to report based on low, very low, or moderate income categories, that you actually look at the chart because they're kind of lying when they put those percentages on there. And right on the edges, so if someone's at like 79 or 82 or 51 or 49, you just want to look at the chart to make sure that you're putting them in the right category because it is a little bit fuzzy with math. Awesome question, Oliver. So for income sources are always going to add up together. So let me stop sharing this, and I can actually jump back in. Okay. So for income sources, the way Homekeeper is designed, all of them are going to add up in this gross field. And so you don't want to add 3 different years' income, because if you added 56 3 times, if we had 3 56 income sources, if you made $56,000 3 years in a row, this would actually say 150. You could show that the eligibility was 150, but the calculations in the hub, I think, a lot of them run off of growth. So Homekeeper is really designed just to have income sources for 1 year. So you'll want to update them to reflect the most recent income. So like, let's say if Nicholas got a raise, we would actually go right into the income source, and we would change it. And so we'd actually be updating this one. Does that answer your question, Oliver? And so another thing that you can do, if you want, a lot of people just file the tax returns or the pay stubs in paper files, but you do have the ability to attach them right in Homekeeper. So you could attach like 3 different years of the same income source to one income source, or you could, if you wanted to keep track of those different years, you could print this section and just stick it in the paper file. So, you know, the first time you certified them, the second time, and then the third time, if you wanted. Kind of depends what you need to do that for. And then Erica, Mary Jane, excuse me, and Lindsay, just let me know if I answered your income category question. Great. Okay, so now I'm going to hop back to the PowerPoint and just talk a little bit more about how your process might be from the one I just demoed. And so you saw I had the essentials. I entered applicant and co-applicant, application household members, service file fields, income sources, AMI, and I certified income. So all of those should show up at some point in your process. And so you saw that some of the fields I had in my process were unique to my program. So I have some fields in my training account about particular types of meetings, about particular waitlist criteria. You saw that city income limit field, and that's a specific reporting requirement for my field, for my program. What you didn't see, I have a workflow rule built behind the scenes that sends my applicants an email when their application is complete. So automation is something that you can think about when you're using Homekeeper. It could just be internally send, you know, Julie an email when the client gets to her spot in the application process, or you could actually be sending emails to clients or housing counselors or whoever you want, really. I decided that in my process, I certified the income at least twice. You might just do it once. And I use list views to add information quickly. But processes vary. I know that some of the people who are on the call have an online application. If you have an online application, the applicant, co-applicant, contact information, the kids and grandma, all of their names and their demographic information might appear right in Salesforce if you're using an online application, which means you don't have to enter it in. You just want to check it. You might have a lottery. The ways that the programs who use Homekeeper, the way that they connect applicants to homes varies. Some people use lottery, some people use waitlist. So different people have built out different things in Homekeeper to keep track of those. And yeah, so this is this sample process. And so just to kind of map, if on the left is kind of the descriptive process of what's happening, and on the right is what it is in HomeKeeper speak. You can see that receiving an online application automatically enters those checked off things, and that in this second process I'm talking about, well, we only certify income once. So it's a really good idea to think about, what is your process? So how would you talk about it to a family, and then what does that mean for your data entry? And that's what's on the right. And so I talked a little bit about these things I had going on in my process. Those are all possible in your HomeKeeper too. You can add fields for what you need to track. You can build formulas. You can add fields to track lotteries, send emails, or you could get an online application. And so I think that this little chart shows you that you can customize Salesforce, and some of it is low cost and low reward. Some of it is higher cost and higher reward. And some of it involves more coding and less coding. But two things that are pretty easy that are low clicks and they're free are adding fields and creating workflow rules. So that's what I'll just talk about a little bit right now. And so there's links for a how-to in the training post about this. But if you click on the Quick Access menu in Salesforce and then hover over View Fields right on the right side, there's actually a new field button. And the world is your oyster. You can add as many fields as you want. They can be formulas, they can be pick lists, they can be dates. And so I really encourage you to create fields for those things that you need to track. And you can edit the layout so the layout actually looks like your process. So HomeKeeper comes with this process, and it's like watch DVD and meeting 1, meeting 2. You can take those fields off, and you can add your own fields, whether they're process fields or demographic fields. And then workflow rules can be used to send emails. They can assign tasks and all kinds of different things. I've heard from some folks on this call. Some people have some really great things. Jacqueline actually automates the service file name, and it changes based on when people go through the process. So it'll be like Smith applicant and the year they applied, and then it'll change to Smith purchase and the year they purchased, and things like that. And so there's a link to a really rough sample workflow rule that sends out your application is complete email, and another one to a staff to say, hey, can you talk to the Terhar family? They just completed their application, and can you set up a meeting? And so if anyone's using workflow rules and has some really great stuff happening during your application process, feel free to type it in the chat box. There's a lot of possibilities. And if you don't, let me know when you get inspired and you start using workflow rules. Okay. So Oliver, who's at Upper Valley Mend, has a workflow rule for the wait list, and I think he's typing a little bit more about that. So I know this training today is on application workflow. In 2013, we had a training on workflow rules. So if you're really excited about the possibility of automating different things in Salesforce, I would definitely encourage you to watch that training. It's in the trainings forum, in the HomeKeeper support forum, and there's a lot of, we actually go through building the workflow rules, which I'm not going to do today. And I can post the link. Bear with me for just a second. Oh, okay. So Oliver, I don't know if you're muted, but that's pretty cool. So you have a workflow rule that when you put someone on the wait list, it asks them to update their info a year later? so I cannot find it off the cuff right now, but this is a link to our trainings forum, and just from scanning the 19 trainings we have, I didn't see the workflow on right away. I know it's there. So you can find it in there for the Homestead folks, the workflow training. And it's also linked in some of the training document that I put up for this training. And so just to give everybody a heads up in terms of this chart, so clicks and code and free versus cost, all of these things down at the bottom are part of Salesforce customization. And so Homekeeper is this app built on top of Salesforce, but it opens up a lot of possibilities. Salesforce integrates with all kinds of things like vertical response and online forms, and it can generate ground leases and deed restrictions, all kinds of stuff. But it's also just really customizable in its own right. And so Salesforce just started this really cool new product called Trailhead. And Trailhead will train you on Salesforce in actually in Google Chrome. And so I've done a couple of their modules, as they call them. And if you really want to dive deep on some of these automation or customization pieces, I would definitely encourage you to learn Trailhead, if not just for career development, because it's kind of like a fun, gamey thing to learn sort of these technical skills. So if you feel ambitious, check out Trailhead, and you'll learn a little bit more about things like Process Builder, which takes workflow rules to the next level. And you can also get tips for this kind of stuff in the Power of Us Hub, which is where nonprofits can go for Salesforce support. Yeah, Trailhead is totally free. And so then the last piece I wanted to talk about today is about what can you do with your data. And so as you start to gather data in Homekeeper, you can actually start to report out on it in a lot more reactive way. So some questions that I thought of that you might be able to ask using your data. Looking at what income ranges are applying to your program. Does that mean you need to structure your program differently, ask the city or the state for different types of money, or just demonstrate this demand that people don't really realize? You can talk about probably the majority of your applicants are housing cost burden across income categories. Depending on where you are, they might be living in substandard housing. And so those are kind of advocacy questions that you can then start reporting on to city and state and funders. Programmatically, you're getting data about who your marketing is reaching. So, if you're getting all below 30% applicants and your program's really structured for up to 80, you might want to rethink your marketing or just see if you had a particular outreach that didn't quite hit who you intended for it to hit. There's also fields about referrals. How do you hear about my program? And if you start reporting on that, you can start to see trends. And then another cool thing that I think some of the folks who have been using online applications have been starting to look into is applicant transparency. So you have all these applicants, and they're like selling you their soul. They're giving you their pay stubs and their tax returns and all of this stuff. And they might not necessarily know, how long is the average person on the wait list? How many of your applicants actually end up purchasing? Is the house that I'm interested in, how many of those do you have in your portfolio? If you only have one bedroom, if you have several seniors who live alone who are interested, they're probably not all going to get it. And then also the questions about building wealth and equity definitely would be something that I think that most applicants would be interested in. So these are just some that I thought of. But if anyone is already reporting on data in Homekeeper, please let us know and type it into the chat box. Or if you have some ideas that got spurred by this call, let us know that too. Okay, and again, any inspiration you have after the call, shoot us an email and tell us about it. So after this webinar, you should see the Zendesk article with links from today's call. I will paste that into the chat box in just a second. And then also, we wrote up a blog on income certification, and it talks a little bit more about Erica's question in depth. So, you know, how do I make sure I'm tracking my funder income limits in HomeKeeper? And how do different people track income sources and certify income in HomeKeeper? So we talked to a few HomeKeeper users, and we wrote it up. So I encourage you to read that blog, which I'm also going to paste into the chat box. And thank you to the folks who bore with my email questioning while I was writing that blog. And so a last thought is, regardless of what you do, document how your application process should be tracked in HomeKeeper. When you leave and someone new calls me up, I can tell them, hey, you should track application household members. You should put in income sources. But I can't tell them when, in terms of your literal process, all that should happen. So I pasted a screenshot, and so different programs actually have created little manuals for HomeKeeper, and that can help new users learn when they should be doing these really typical HomeKeeper things in terms of your program. I use a screen capture tool called Jing, so you can take pictures of your layout and circle the fields and stuff like that, or you can just write it up. But it's definitely helpful for me and for them that if your process isn't totally transparent when you just open HomeKeeper up, write it down. And then last, we've got a little bit of time if anyone has any questions. And then if you have any questions you think of after this call, you can email support@myhomekeeper.org or visit homekeeper.zendesk.com. Oh, yeah. So I think that Anastasia had a question about saving. So I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint, and I'll open up HomeKeeper again. And so one tip that I actually like is there's two different ways that you can save without clicking. If you hit Edit, you can start using, if you're used to using tabs, you can actually tab through the fields. But I think you need to tab all the way to the bottom to click Save. But if you want to tab through fields, that works. But then also, if you're editing a field, and so we'll say, okay, actually this was a bad example, but this field was not a good example. Most of the time, if you are editing a field and it's in that kind of edit mode, if you hit Enter twice, it'll actually, so when you hit Enter, so I'll say Steve, and then I hit Enter, it actually selects the Save button, and then when I hit Enter again, it actually prompts the Save button to save. So that's the best tip I know to avoid having to click stuff to save. Anastasia? And then if anyone else has any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box, or you can verbally talk to. Excuse me. Great. Well, I don't need to keep everybody on the call longer than you want. This training is recorded, so if you want to watch it again, or if you want to have your colleague watch it, I'm going to post a link to the recording in that article that I put the link out to. And so yeah, I hope that was helpful, and do let us know if you have questions or if you're inspired by anything and you think all the other HomeKeeper users should know about it. And Oliver, tell Kelly I say hi too. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to stop recording, but then I'll just stay on the line for a couple minutes if anybody has any questions.